NYU is a paying member of the WCET State Authorization Network. WCET-SAN is a valuable resource to NYU's state authorization compliance efforts and actively participates in all available WCET-SAN activities. NYU was honored to have the opportunity to present on this webinar, which was a part of a monthly series available to WCET-SAN members. For more information about WCET-SAN, please visit wcet.wiche.edu/advance/state authorization network.
Next, we wanted to get a different point of view from a different type of institution in a different part of the country. So, Brianna, very happy that you could join us today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Russ, and thank you, Lana. That was really interesting, and you guys are doing some things that are similar to us and some things that are different to us here at NYU. So that was a great start for me to kind of launch off of for some things that we have to do differently, because NYU is not predominantly a distance education institution. We're predominantly more traditional brick and mortar with a growing online offering and presence. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of context about New York University and share more with you about the kind of makeup of our school, some core components of the systems that we've created to track where our students are, and then just address some key tips and takeaways that can maybe even share some samples of language that we use or some screenshots of things we use that have been really helpful for us to kind of navigate tracking our students here at NYU. So first, New York University is located in New York City. We are a private, not-for-profit institution, a large research institution, and we have about 50,000 students, over 1,000 programs, and currently 25 online programs. And in terms of the large research institution classification, we're also incredibly decentralized in how we're managed. There are 17 separate degree granting units or colleges within the university, 3 portal campuses, 2 global sites, 1 in Abu Dhabi and 1 in Shanghai, and 1 in Washington, D.C. here stateside, with 11 study away sites. So when we kind of step back to look at where are our students, we had a lot of moving parts to kind of ask questions and think about and reflect how can we come up with a system that will help NYU to do the due diligence we need to do in order to comply and do the reporting that is required of our institution.
Brianna, what's a portal campus?
A portal campus is when we physically own the land and building affiliated with it, as opposed to a study away site where we're partnering with a pre-existing institution. So the portal campus also means that a student can enroll and start their education at NYU from that location. So we have a freshman class enrolling from the campus in Shanghai, and our model is really circular. So it's designed so that every student that enrolls in the undergraduate program at NYU, regardless of what their point of entry is, has the opportunity to cycle through not only our portal campuses, but also our study away sites to complete their education here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So when we kind of sat back and looked at this, we asked ourselves, what do we need to know? What are the core components to get started on tracking where our students are? Kind of what do we already know? What do we have currently within the systems that exist or within the school's database? And then where can we generally just get started? Because there was an immediate need for compliance at NYU in some states that we had already been operational in and needed to kind of close that gap. And from there, kind of knowing that we would need to reflect on whatever system we first embarked on and take some time to improve that system and just continually make it better in any way that we could. So what did this look like at NYU? For NYU, we were able to recognize that we needed to secure 16 different data points. And that included kind of the student's full name, email address, ID number, which school or college they were actually part of, their major, their degree, the type of placement that the student was doing, if it was for credit or not for credit, if it was required or optional, who their employer was, what their job title was, what industry they were working in, a start and end date for the experience that they're engaged in, their job location, and also if there was compensation, what was the compensation type? Was it hourly, salary, nothing at all, stipends, honorarium? Because when we did an overview of all the state regulations, we realized that because we're not only distance ed and we are brick and mortar and our students kind of going out mostly in the summertime to complete these experiences, there was kind of a broader scope of items that could trigger a need for compliance for us than just having a student get virtual education via distance education. So then we kind of stepped back and reflected on what do we currently have existing here at NYU. So we checked in with the Institutional Research Office. We checked in with the Student Information System, which here at NYU is built on the PeopleSoft platform. Some of you might use the same platform. And then we checked in with the individual schools, with the dean's offices, and from there learned that some schools had full-time field placement coordinators to help their students secure placements outside of our home campus. So it was really important for us once we realized how much was going on here and how much was diversity and inconsistency there was within NYU to really just listen to the stakeholders that we were talking to and just absorb everything that was happening before we kind of scared anyone or said, well, great, we need A, B, and C, and you only have A, so what are you going to do? We knew we had to come up with some kind of central plan to support everybody, but also still have a certain amount of flexibility because everybody was so different. So that's kind of how we attacked just figuring out what was going on. So really our first round of compliance was, to be honest, not that great. We just had to get started and work with what we had. So we just decided you have to start somewhere, and we asked the schools and the offices that we were talking to just send over the information that you have. And in some cases, the schools said, we've never tracked this. In other cases, the schools sent over a student worker with a really messy folder that kind of looked like the dog ate my homework, that we had a student worker come in and kind of enter into a database to just start getting a rough idea of where our students were and also what kind of programs had students engaging in these experiences. And then, some had very organized signed contracts with field placement coordinators that could tell us beyond what we needed to know about where the student was and what they were doing. So that was really our first round of compliance. And while we knew it wasn't 100%, it also wasn't 0%, so it gave us a start. And simultaneously, we started thinking where are central locations that we could turn to make this better. So we identified as step 3 our SIS system, the Student Information System, which eventually led to be an option that didn't work out for us because for our purposes, we had to identify some students that were doing things for credit, but some also doing things not for credit. And within our PeopleSoft SIS system, the way the codes are organized, there is no unique identifier to pull to denote if a student is doing a non-classroom experience or located in another state with any kind of definitive answer. So we immediately knew that for tracking non-classroom experiences, we couldn't do it through the SIS system, but that we could track where our distance education students were through the SIS system. So for the non-classroom experience tracking, we turned to our Career Center because they already had a system like this and they wanted more data, and all students had the ability to log into that portal. So we partnered with the Career Center to build that out a little bit more and to see if that could be a viable option for tracking. And we ran a pilot with our School of Professional Studies because they have robust distance education offerings as well as field placements, so they were a great starting point. And when we ran the pilot, we got a 55% compliance rate of students reporting what was going on, which was much higher than what we expected for a pilot. So once we identified that that option really did work well, we decided to incorporate it university-wide. And when we did that, we realized that we couldn't force everybody to use the Career Center option. So we also provided custom options. So we created just a simple Excel template with the fields that matched the Career Center option so that the reports could be merged and the data could be reported and run. And we could really get a comprehensive summary of where our students were from not only the distance ed students in the SIS system, but also our traditional students who were here on campus and popping in and out all over the globe to do these engagements on various levels. So that's kind of what we came up with. And then within that custom option, we allowed for flexibility when we really listened to our schools. If they didn't want to send a link to their students because they already had the information from the field placement coordinators, we didn't force them to. If they only had a list of all their placements once a year, they didn't have to adhere to our 3 times a year reporting requirement, because twice a year they would just be giving us blank reports. So it was really important to build those relationships and to just work with them on that front.
Brianna, we have a couple of good questions here on these points, and I'm going to start with the last one from Nicole about, do you mean your Career Center in College of Professional Studies have overlays which allow you to pull more useful data from PeopleSoft?
No, they don't. They're separate systems. Our Career Center runs a platform called Simplicity, and our SIS system is on PeopleSoft, and they're completely separate. So we use the SIS system to run our reports of where our distance education students are from, because that's tied to our enrollment system, and we can have a unique identifier within that system, within the PeopleSoft database. But for the Career Center, that's where everything else comes. That's where all of our traditional students who are doing non-classroom experiences, they get sent a link by their deans twice a semester to ask them to report on what they're doing and where. And we pull the data from both places with matching fields and merge them to have a comprehensive report. Great question, thank you.
Okay, that is good, yeah. And then we have Laura and Kim are asking about whether you'd be willing to share the 16 data points, and I'll expand that a little bit, that not only it's one thing to share the fields, but if you could share the definitions of those fields, that might be helpful as well.
Sure, yeah, I can send that out, absolutely.
Okay, excellent, good.
Great. So the next thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about was just working with the Office of Institutional Research at your university. And it's really important here to realize that, kind of what Lana brought up, just that you could be speaking a different language, and when you do that and you don't have the meeting to kind of really get on the same page with what you're asking for, you could end up with bad data even though you took the time and effort to get the data. So I just cut this out to show you what a report looks like, and this is just a snapshot of a report from IR, and this had thousands and thousands of entries for us. So I said, can you run a report of our distance education programs so I can have the codes, and then I need to know where the students are enrolled in each program. So I opened this attachment and saw thousands of entries and thought, what is this? And I saw some programs that appeared twice, some programs that weren't appearing at all. So that's when I reached out to schedule a meeting and just kind of figure out what I was looking at and how to read it and understand it. And what I learned was actually that when the courses here at NYU that are distance education were uploaded into the SIS system, the programs sometimes were given unique codes and identifiers, because sometimes the individual schools wanted to be able to run reports on fall enrollments versus spring enrollments, or distance education full-time versus distance education part-time. So sometimes there was a different unique identifier within the SIS system to denote those things, just to make running data reports easier. So what we found out was sometimes we were running a report with 4 different academic plan codes just to get a comprehensive list for one academic program of where the students were. So this was a really important catch that I definitely was not prepared for and didn't think about, and the Office of Institutional Research was really helpful in just kind of explaining the way that they do their queries, and also very upfront with, if you're ever going to need this again, tell us, because they have the ability to archive it so that they don't have to create it from scratch, so that we can make sure we're pulling the same data every year, so we have the same data to compare last year's versus this year. We also have just some key tips and takeaways. The first one is just to partner with other offices. So all of our enrollment agreements are catered to make sure that we stay in compliance. Certain schools have programs, and literally the drop-down menu does not have a state as an option if we don't have permission to enroll them there. And we just keep everybody informed, even if there's a move, the law school will call and say we have a student that needs to relocate. It's a state that's restricted, what do we do? And immediately we're calling the regulator to say, this is the situation. Could we have an exemption for their student, or could you work with us so that we could keep them enrolled? So that was really important for us, to just really partner with the institutional research office, partner with admissions, partner with our marketing people so that they know where they can and can't do their marketing, and just really kind of all be on the same page. And we also found it really helpful to just provide resources. The schools are busy. They don't specialize in state authorization. Sometimes they don't have a lot of time to really sit down and understand it, and they just want you to tell them, what can I and can't I do, and how do I find out? So a lot of times our office will go as far as drafting emails for them. So we redrafted the email that they send out to send the Career Center link to their students. We provided screenshots of the Career Center portal for the students that they attach to the email. We provide templates of enrollment agreements, templates of language for licensure disclosure, for where they are and aren't approved. And we really kind of partner with them to serve as a resource to support them so that they can not worry about this, just kind of efficiently go out there and build their school and do their job. And then the big thing for us too is sharing data and just having transparency in the data that we collect. I think that so often people are really protective of, this is my data, or I can't share this. And we do share it with the individual schools. So once we kind of get to a place where we have our information about where our students are, we segment that report by school and we send it to the dean's office so that they can see we had 500 students do clinical experiences this year and this is where they went. And we kind of put a positive spin on that because it is a positive thing. Now they can understand and say kind of in their admissions talks, 50% of our students are doing X, Y, and Z, and this is great, and we're growing here. And we've grown from last year to this year. So it's been really helpful and beneficial on both sides to just even have the data and be able to share it. And then just being available and flexible. Flexible for our med school who one time a year knows where their students are going. So again, they couldn't report to us 3 times a year because they wouldn't have anything to report, and just being available for questions when people know that they can pick up the phone and call you if they don't understand the website. We have a website here at NYU to kind of guide them through what can you and can't you do for state authorization, and that's available to them. But if they don't understand something on it, they have a real person that they can pick up the phone and call or make an appointment with or have a presentation to all of the chairs within their department. The 2 other things in terms of tracking programs and program changes, like Lana, we do have an activity survey that we have done to figure out where activity is happening for distance ed and for non-classroom experiences. But we also have a form that we've implemented that's required for new program proposals and program changes. So when schools come through and have a program change or a new program, they're required to fill out a state authorization activity form, and all of the fields that could trigger a need for compliance are in there. And if they denote that they have or are adding any of that activity that is a need for, that triggers a need for compliance for our office before the program is even put through for approval in New York State, we call them and have a state authorization meeting with them and say, I see you're adding an internship component. Let me explain state authorization to you. These are the states that you can't allow interns to go to with your program and the approvals we currently have. And then we present them with our strategic plan to comply and let them know when those states will be opening up over the next 2 years for them. And then just in general, we're very careful to adhere to our institutional reporting policies for compliance. For example, Ferpa, when students are filling out this information on the portals that we have or signing contracts with the field placement coordinators, we do have a Ferpa waiver that they sign so that we can report the stuff. I know that a lot of people interpret Ferpa to allow them to do that, but NYU's General Counsel made the decision that it would be important for us to have this paperwork on file with the information that some states are asking us to report. So that was another thing that we just created for the schools and made available to them as a template that just goes in their stack of things to give to the students and report on.
Some questions here, Brianna. That one, you said something about eliminating tuition to allow a student to continue in a state. Could you say a bit more about that? Let's see.
Yeah, that was a special case. That's not something we do every day. But there was a special case with a student who had been in one of our online programs for a very long time and was enrolling from a state that we had the appropriate approvals in and had to move to a state that we didn't have the approvals in. And that would mean that we would need to get approval, but the approval process was 6 months, and New York just became a SARA state, so we knew that that's kind of coming down the pipe and we would be covered under that. So we made the kind of return on investment decision that with the amount of time the student had left, it made sense just to make a scholarship opportunity available to them so that they could continue their studies and still relocate.
So did you negotiate that with the state? Because typically that's not enough to allow you to serve that student in another state.
Yeah, we did call the regulator on that, and we had a conversation. So with what we were doing and with what the student was doing, that situation was okay. But I do think it's very important to communicate with the regulators with stuff like that. And just anytime we have a student move to someplace that we don't have approvals, we're always in communication with the regulator to just pick up the phone and say, you know, they only have one semester left. What can we do to work together? Or, you know, or in some cases, the answer is you have to put that program through for approval, and the student's going to have to pause on their studies for 6 months while you get that approval. So usually they'll work with you if they can. Sometimes, you know, that's not always the case. So it just depends.
Yeah, it seems to me that most states will work with you on those sorts of things that they'll come up with. If the student especially is fairly well along in their studies, that they usually will try to help with that. I've heard of only one state, and it was a little bit tough on that, but most will try to work with you. We had another question here just for context. That are you centralized in your distance ed, or are you decentralized?
We're decentralized. We have 3 schools that offer distance education: our Polytechnic School of Engineering, our School of Continuing Professional Studies, and our School of Law, and they all operate completely separate from one another and correspond directly with our office for compliance matters.
Okay, that helps. Okay. And then you were talking about templates before. Are you willing to share those? And then do you have some language for professional licensure disclosures for face-to-face programs?
So we have a diversity of things here, and what I did is I just built in an appendix to the slides to kind of share some of the stuff that we do have. So this is kind of the email that we do to get people to report, and then these are the screenshots from our Career Center portal to explain to students how to complete the information. This is our state authorization activity form, which is available on NYU's state authorization website. But if you need it, I could send this to you. It's pretty simple, and I think you actually have to fill it out to see all of the fields. So please don't fill out a bunch of test ones. I'll just send you the blank one. And then this is our kind of Ferpa consent form that the students are signing off on when they do non-classroom experiences. So I did include in the slides, which I think WCET is going to make available after the presentation, some of the templates of some of the things that we do. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
Okay, we'll send out the slides, and then you're going to send out a copy of that one form so that people can see it without filling it out and giving you all sorts of empty forms.
Thanks.
Okay, that's really good. And I think we had the for the activity document for state authorization, what information do you request for that document before a new online program is approved or a new out-of-state program is approved?
That I'll send out, but we basically ask kind of the 5 big triggers, like do you have any proctoring that happens outside of New York State? Do you plan to have marketing or advertising for this program outside of New York State? Is there some kind of non-classroom experience? Is there a distance education component? And then depending on how they answer that, it will trickle down to additional questions like, is your internship a paid experience? Is it supervised by an NYU staff member? Stuff like that. So anything that is kind of within the 16 triggers that we've defined within the non-classroom experience realm of triggering a need for compliance is kind of captured in that form on some level, or at least enough to give us an initial idea that we need to follow up with them to learn more about what they're doing.
Excellent. Okay. And then one just came in here. What percentage of students declined to sign the Ferpa consent form?
We haven't had any students decline to sign it yet. It hasn't been an issue. They've all kind of not asked a lot. Anybody that's asked questions about it once they understood why has signed it with no problem. And
as you mentioned on the Ferpa, that could be quite variable by institution in terms of how they interpret the Ferpa regulation there about whether they are going to require that consent or not. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to a lot of institutions that don't do it. Some of the team at Cooley feels that you don't have to do it. Some feel that it's a good idea. So I think there's definitely a split decision. NYU tends to operate in a highly compliant atmosphere with a kind of high aptitude for risk mitigation. So when stuff like this comes up, we usually err on the side of caution and just kind of put that in the mix.
And you just mentioned a list of 16 triggers. Could you share that list as well?
Yeah, I can send that list out.
Okay. Let's see, and then one more here, then we'll let you go on. Are you speaking strictly of internship type programs as needing authorization?
Well, for the processes that we have, the one with the SIS system is tied to our solely online programs, which we do compliance for. And we use the term here non-classroom experience to encompass everything from clinicals, practicums, clerkships, internships, externships, field placement. The name that the school calls them really doesn't differentiate from the fact that it's a student physically going to another state to engage in learning. It's kind of, at the end of the day, how we classify it. So they can call it whatever they want, but for the purposes of compliance, they kind of do all get lumped into one bucket, and then from there, depending on the nuances, it might matter in one state or not in another. But we found that generally the act of having just a general non-classroom experience either does or doesn't trigger a need for some kind of regulatory compliance with the state.
I'm glad you said that about it doesn't matter what you call it, because we were in a conversation one time, Marianne and I were both in this, that somebody was saying, oh, well, internships are regulated. If I call it an externship, is that okay? Is the student in another state? Yes. Are you collecting tuition? Are you doing things there? Yes. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely something that the schools that I work with, it's one of the first questions they ask, like, what if we didn't call it a clinical? And it's, still the same activity happening. So
I'm sure no one on this webcast has heard that before, but I'll let you go on.
That's kind of generally, I think that takes me to the end of my slides. So if there's anything else that anybody has to ask, I'm happy to answer it or speak to it, but hopefully the slides and the screenshots that I've shared will be helpful, and NYU's website is a great resource. Just a friendly reminder that NYU's website is very specific to NYU and where we are in compliance. We operate really at 100% compliance daily, but we're at 74 compliance for where we've secured our approvals or exemptions that we need. But the website that I just posted a link to in the chat box serves to show our school people where they can and can't have certain activity based on the approvals or types of approvals we have. So a lot of people from other schools will visit my website and say, this is great, we printed it out and gave it to our provost and we're going to use the same plan. But for this plan, it definitely takes into account that we have approvals in specific places based on our specific activity. So it shouldn't be used kind of as another institution's strategic plan, because it's very custom to where NYU is in our path to compliance right now.